I chose the title Water More or Less for this exhibition because in one way or another all the works refer to either more water or less water. Flooding, drought, desalination, contamination. But I also wanted the title to suggest how we take water for granted, especially in Ireland. So the phrase more or less is something we hear every day, and it means a degree of difference which is of no consequence, something that doesn't really matter. But of course water is absolutely essential to life. So I wanted a title and the works to have something of that contradiction, something of those opposites. The title of this particular piece is called When Water Becomes Explosive. It's the largest piece in the exhibition, standing 2 meters plus high and 4 meters plus square. It's a 9 squared figure, and it's made up of plexiglass tubes containing oil and water, and they are held together by horizontals and aluminium connectors, keeping the shape. I borrowed this figure, if you like, this 9 squared figure from an American game. It's called 9 Square in the Air. It's played by children in America. And it seemed a good fit for this particular work, which is about fracking. I wanted to make that American connection because America produces more oil than anybody else. As an artwork, I suppose it's light, it's airy, you can walk through it, it's very open. And it also has a certain elegance, a refinement, which is completely at odds with what the work is about, which is something very dirty and very dangerous. And I wanted the work to have that contradiction, if you like, that tension between two very different things. I also wanted to suggest in the title that at a future time these two substances may be reversed in terms of their value. And as we know of now, as we know at the moment, oil is prized above water, but in the future, as water reserves reduce, that may be reversed. And we may then, at that time, have the market trying to exploit water for profit. The work references fracking. The full title is Hydraulic Fracturing. In other words, using water to break something. And that's exactly what happens in fracking. It's very deep drilling, deep vertical drilling, and then very long horizontal drilling. And water, vast amounts of water are used in order to break the rock. And in the process of extracting fossil fuel, huge amounts of water are contaminated to the point where they can't be cleaned or reused. In fact, the water is often buried in the ground at the end of the process. The smallest piece in the exhibition is a silver bullet, and it's part of an installation called Drinking the Ocean. This too has a sort of incendiary element. A bullet is something that can kill, and silver bullet is a phrase we use in everyday conversation, and we usually use it when we're asking if there's some kind of magic solution to a problem. And I see this work in the exhibition as a kind of little questioning presence. Will desalination be the answer to water shortages? We don't know. There are lots of problems with desalination, emissions and toxic brine and so on. So once again, we have a very attractive artwork. The bullet case was silver plated. The capsule is made of glass, and it contains desalinated water from the Irish Sea. So we have, a very small, questioning little item to remind us perhaps that desalination, while it seems to offer an answer, it's not without its problems. This piece is called Cut Off, and it's a line of taps. Line has been very important in my work, and it's something that interests me. A line can divide and separate. It can suggest infinity, or it can terminate. A few years ago, I did an exhibition called Lines Tell Lies, because lines can also trick the eye. But in this exhibition, the line is very simple. It's simply following the line of the wall in the long gallery. I started out with 12 taps, but in juxtaposition with the large sculpture, somehow or another 12 seemed too many, and the line had to reduce, and so I ended up using 10 taps instead. I suppose you could say it's a bit more playful, this piece, but mind you, if your water is cut off, that's no fun at all. And there are households in Ireland that have had their water cut off for very, very long periods of time. This installation is made up of 3 elements: text, a glass form, and a table with jug and glasses. The text reads, "The water you drink will pass through 7 pairs of kidneys before it reaches yours." The glass form has water, clean water on one side and wastewater in the other. And then a table, a cafe table with a jug of water and drinking glasses. Now, this piece references recycling of water, something that we're not doing yet in Ireland, but the government are considering it, so it may be a reality for us in the future. But it is a reality in many countries where we have toilet to tap drinking water. It's almost incomprehensible, but water can be cleaned to pristine quality. Water table is an installation of 7 glass tanks on a very long table. And the glass tanks contain water, full at one end and empty at the other. And there's a single spotlight. I like to show this piece in darkness with a single spotlight lighting the piece from above. And completing it, there's a sound work by composer Rona Clark. The sound work operates as a kind of narrative for the piece. It starts with very heavy rain, and then that reduces to a kind of trickle, and in the end we're getting the sound of empty containers and very parched, dry, waterless places. Many people look at this work and they read it initially as referencing flooding and drought, and of course that's part of the work. But the title is Water Table, and I have in mind the groundwater. It's the water we don't see underneath the ground, and how that fluctuates depending on rainfall and depending on how much we use it, how much we take up. And I found it really alarming to realize that if the groundwater is pumped beyond a certain level, nature won't recharge it. And the water in the ground is our bank balance in terms of water. And if it's overused, that's the end. There is no more. When More is Less is a 2-part work. It involves a moving image piece on a monitor and also a sculpture. And the title of the work, When More is Less, is referring to the fact that when we have flooding, and flooding is something that we have a lot of in Ireland, and when we see flood water, we see a huge amount of it. And it suggests to us that we have no water problem in Ireland, we have lots and lots of it. But actually, in flood conditions, all the systems are disrupted, and very often the water system is badly contaminated. So we actually end up with less water rather than more. And on the monitor, I have put together a sequence of flood images, flooding in Ireland that has happened over the last maybe 12 years or so, 10 years perhaps. And then together with that, in the floor space, I have a very, very abstract, very spare sculpture on a plinth, a container of water out of which protrude 2 white ladders. And I suppose I'm suggesting in the sculpture that ultimately there is no escape. We see pictures of people on their roofs sometimes in flood conditions, and if the waters keep rising, there is nowhere to go. The language of water treatment is really interesting to me because it's so indirect. It's almost poetic. We have phrases like receiving rivers, intrusion barrier, flock formation. So, there's nothing there telling us what's actually going on. And to some degree, you could say my work is somewhat similar because it's very clean, it's very white, it's very sanitized. It's very like the language of water treatment.